He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Te he wa Māori ora ki te whaiau, ki te taiau, ki te ao marama ki au ti he Māori ora ko Māpuna tēnei mihi atu nei. Kia ora and welcome back to Māpuna the podcast. And this week, our guest is Julian Arahanga. We call him Sonny. I think because he's the son of Larry Parr. I think that's why we call him Sonny. Anyway, Sonny is our guest. Now, you may remember him from the movie Once We're Warriors. He played Nig, the eldest son of Jake the Muss. Since then, he's gone on to become an award-winning producer and director. And I should say that what you'll hear in this interview is something I didn't remember until I got the note from my producer, Tama, who reminded me that Sonny, Julian Arahanga, was the actor, the young actor, on the short film The Makutu on Mrs. Jones, featuring Annie Whittle and Taranaki Tohunga Sonny Waru. Since his acting days, and particularly since Once We're Warriors, he's gone on, as I've said, to make a number of documentaries and films, one of which was a story about John Pohe. It's called Tūranga Arere. Today, however, we're focused on his latest production. It's called Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, and it centres itself on the battle for Māoridom to secure fishing rights, which led to, of course, the settlement, sometimes called the Sea Lord's Deal, the first Treaty of Waitangi settlement in the early 1990s. He talks about some of the champions of that crusade and of that fight, but also the way in which he tells that story and breaks down what can be complex, legalistic arguments relating to a treaty settlement into a movie that can be absorbed and can enthrall many people. Our guest is Julian Arahanga. The story focuses on Mana Moana, Mana Tangata. You're listening to Māpuna the podcast. E te iwi, whakarongo mai. E te rangatira Sonny, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe e kara, Julian.
Ora ana, e nui ana roto. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for giving us generously your time, because it is you are a busy person, and it is a busy time. So I mean that when I say thank you for the time. And you've done a lot, and if you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit about the career, because actually there's a film, and I don't know if you know this, but there was a film that really impacted me that you did, ko Tūranga Arere, about John Pohe, and I want to get into that. But first of all, if you don't mind, let's start with Mana Moana, Mana Tangata. What compelled you to want to do this work?
Well, it was a funny one to start off with, because we were approached by Lisa Te Hiuhiu, who wanted to capture. She was the CEO of Te Kaimoana, and she wanted to capture the whole idea and story of 30 years since the settlement. And in 1992, when the settlement and other things were going on, my mind was in faraway places from fishing deals and stuff like that, Julie. So I wasn't aware, of all the nuance involved in this story. But as we started to discuss, and Toby and I joined forces, and we started to sort of frame up what the story was, I was in absolute awe of the people, ngā tangata rongo nui, who went about the work, had the vision to see what was happening at that time with the privatisation of fishing, the loss of fishing rights, which is something that Māori had been doing in this land, for centuries, and the dire consequences that would happen if they did not act. And so as I started to learn the gravity and the stakes, it became an easy sell to commit to the project. We did something small, just like a 6-minute promo style piece for the 30th celebration that was held at Te Papa. And that sort of bedded us into the project. And from there, we knew that there was enough story, enough meat and enough of a reason to want to make a feature film about this.
You talk about the fight, and it was truly a fight, and the ongoing, actually, now, issues relating to fishery and protection and those kinds of things now. How hard is it, Sonny, to try and capture the essence of that in film? Because it feels like it's not easy to be able to convey that in a way that it still can impact an audience, given this happened over 30 years ago now.
Yeah, well, I think one of the key elements in all of this is the quality of the leadership. When you start hearing names like Tā Maturata, Tā Graham Latimer, Mira Sazis, Manu Paul, Tipene Regan, Whatarangi Winiata, and the list goes on, and it's too many to name. But when you consider all those names and the quality of the people, and some of those were alive, and they are articulate, they're intelligent people that know how to tell story, and so that gave us a solid foundation. But then we were also able to look into archives where we could capture the essence of people and the way they thought at that particular time through the archive that we were able to source. And there's some fabulous stuff out there, very fabulous. There's a great interview with Maturata. And when you think of these people, you're not really prepared for their accent that they had. And he spoke really with the Queen's English, but the way he was able to navigate the probings of the Pākehā interviewer on Television One in that particular interview, it just leaves you in no doubt the quality of the person, and how smart he was to navigate those hostile questions and actually turn it into a victory. So those are some of the tools that we have as filmmakers to be able to draw on to tell this particular story.
With great access also comes great responsibility. You tend to do this really well, and what I see of your work is that when you're talking about people's stories and lives, and essentially this is another story of people's lives and their stories that are attached to them, but you carry the weight of that responsibility really well. How are you able to do that? It appears so easily. Or is it not so easy, Sonny?
I don't know. Nui te kaupapa o tēnei kiriata, the kōrero so important. I think if you're holding that responsibility at the front of what you do, and always, when you fall off the rails, or you head down a track that's kind of a bit of a dead end, as long as you keep coming back to the reasons of why you're doing something, you'll always find a pathway forward. And I tell you, I don't think I've made a habit out of trying to find these kaupapa that weigh heavy. It's not something that I kind of intentionally set out to do.
Is it a case of the kaupapa finding you, Sonny?
Oh, Julian, come. Potentially that holds some water, but I think the next things that I'm doing, I'm looking to do some comedy. We've got a show in the works called Little Tito, and it's a political satire, and I think that the environment, the political environment, is ripe for some comedy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, while I do love and I cherish the opportunity to make this particular film with Toby and our team, we had a very good team, and having Toby as a sounding board, and Toby's done a lot of mahi that has very heavy kaupapa as well.
Yeah.
And so, we're able to share the load and bounce off each other. And, we were really ably supported by our editor, Daniel Mulholland, who was able to just be there and offer different avenues and different ways forward when we come unstuck. Because it's a terribly complex story. The kaupapa is big, but this particular story is it's really complex. And the challenge for us was to make a film that could tell the story but not get bogged down in the legal jargon and
Yeah.
legal terminology, and then you lose people because they don't really understand what's going on. And so that was a big challenge for us. And fortunately, last night we had a screening here in Wellington at Te Papa, and that was for all of the stakeholders of the Māori fishing world, and the talent who were in the documentary, who were involved in the making. It was really nerve-wracking presenting their story to them, and knowing, how much was at stake. But it was really pleasant at the end of the film to have people come up to us and say, thank you for capturing our history, and thank you for telling the story in a way that others, not only Maori, but others will be able to sort of follow along. And there was lots of talk about people wanting their children to see it, so they can understand, as iwi Maori, how we got to where we are, in this particular, at this particular moment in time. Because a lot, as you know, Jules, the fishing settlement was the very first Waitangi Treaty settlement, and because of the way that settlement was done, it laid the platform for all of those that followed, and provided a foothold for Māori to start to gain economic independence.
I'm trying really hard not to bury the lead and give the whole movie over because I want people to go see it, okay? But I do note the name of the movie called Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, because that very phrase in itself and the build-up to the settlement means a whole lot. And it's probably the most appropriate name for it, by the way, because we talk about the fight, not just for recognition of Māori rights in the fishery, but also in terms of the fight between Māori and themselves, about the best way to achieve allocation that reflects, as the name says of the production, Mana Moana, Mana Tangata. And that went on for a long time. And you talk about the complexities of telling the story. That in and of itself is a complex issue to talk about. How are you able to do that in a way? What's the thinking process that goes on for you as a producer, Sonny, to go, this is really complex. There is a lot of legal jargon. There are a lot of perspectives involved. I've got to try and find a pathway through this and get a movie out at the end of it. What's the thinking process that goes on from a producer to be able to achieve that?
Well, thanks for picking up on the title, because that was not initially the title. There was Mana Moana, there was Mana this, there was the Māori fight for fisheries. There were so many names. And it took us a while to land on that. And as you know, that particular term drove a wedge between iwi, between Māori, between hapu, and that whole idea of population versus coastline, and trying to find a way forward. These are the difficult things that they dealt with. And as Robin Happy says, the difficult part is right. The part that it could not be done is wrong. And as Jamie Tuta says, there was winners and there was losers. But there was always going to be that way. But, before it, Māori were looking like having nothing. After it, they had something. Was it perfect? No. We live under a political structure that pushes and pulls us in different directions, and stomps on us and stuff. So it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And from that start of what they were able to achieve with that 10%, now Māori have worked up to 55% of the industry. What we do with that much influence is the key from now on.
And it's still an ongoing fight too, eh, Sonny? There's still, I remember when I was working at Ngaitahu, and the idea that was mentioned by the then Prime Minister John Key for a marine sanctuary to be housed or to be placed by the Kermadec, which had a direct impact actually on the fisheries settlement. And then the fight that went on then. This ongoing battle, Sonny, this ongoing battle for rights and recognition, some of which have already been enshrined in statute, over 30 years ago now, and yet still an ongoing fight to have those rights reinforced. It just seems a really interesting place to be at the moment in the current political climate. And that's why I think movies like this are important, because, as Tātipine O'Regan says, we must remember to remember. Is that what you are doing in your work, Sonny? Trying to enable us to remember to remember?
Absolutely. This story has not been told, and like I said at the start of the interview, I didn't know the story. So it's absolutely important that the story is known and what went on. I think it's astute that you pick up on the Kermadec and Rangitaua, because that is a significant chapter in the film, and it's another example of the blazing arrogance of the Crown, of governments that come in not understanding the full detail of what a settlement is and what a settlement holds, and how any potential willy-nilly suggestions can start to have things unraveling. And for those that don't know, John Key and his government, they pretty much attempted to do that on their own. They had no consultation with Māori. They went and he stood up at the United Nations. I think Nick Smith did a courtesy call to Maturei, Tā Maturei, the 24 hours before, and he didn't ask about any consultation. He said, John Key's going to announce that we're going to make the biggest marine sanctuary in the world, in the Kermadec. And that was that. It's like, that is so irresponsible. It also highlights the danger of governments talking with NGOs, taking advice from NGOs on conservation, and not starting in the right place and consulting with iwi Māori.
I think I remember it well too, Sonny, because there was a press conference held in Parliament, I think, not long after that announcement, which had Mark Solomon, Dame Iri Tanata Whiwhirangi, Dame Nader Glavish, I think Dame Nader Glavish was there, and Tātipine O'Regan holding court as he tends to do, who 2 days earlier was actually in hospital and checked himself out, and boom, he's off to Wellington, and they have this press conference. And but you're right, and so, you know, I think these are really important things and stories that we have to not only remember to remember, but we also have to get the right people telling these stories in a way so that it is easier for us to remember. And that's why I want to focus a bit more on you and your work life, if you don't mind, because
Jules, I'll just pick up actually, just so people will understand. I spoke to the chairman, my cousin actually, Pāhia Turia,
yes,
the chairman of Te Ohu Moana, the current chair, and he said that the vast majority of Te Ohu Moana's work is fighting legal cases to keep the government in check, while they would rather be out there doing other things that are beneficial and more proactive in the fishing industry and out through Māori communities and marae. That's what they spend their time doing, holding the Crown to account. So yeah,
isn't that both a fascinating thing, but also a massive indictment on the Crown?
Yeah.
And having storytellers like yourself remind us to do that, I think is really important. By the way, you're listening to Māpuna. Our guest is Julian Arahanga, who I'm calling Sunny for the benefit of the audience so they can tell which Julian's speaking at what time. On RNZ National, it's great to have your company. It's great to have Sunny with us. I see what you also tried to do there subtly is try and get me off point in talking about your work life. But dog with a bone, I'm going to continue, okay? I hope you don't mind. Because I've watched your work, as I said earlier, I've watched your work over a long period of time. And I'm amazed by actually the catalogue of work that you've done now, but also the superlative quality of it. How does someone who was actually a really, really good actor, and some would say, well, it's just the career progression to go on to doing directing and producing. But how does someone who was a really good actor go on to be so good at it?
Well, I enjoy it. I love it, and I guess the thing for me about moving from acting was that I wanted to tell the story, whether that's producing, whether that's directing, whether that's writing. And in that way, I feel like I have tinoranga tiratanga over my work. I find, when you're acting or if you're a freelancer, then, you're always kind of waiting for the phone to ring or the jobs to come up. But in us at our films, having our own company, having our own slate of projects and constantly, looking for new ideas and stories to test, I get great satisfaction out of that. And we're actually in a rich vein currently with, we'd recently released a feature film called Stolen Children in April, and then our feature drama directed by Kath Akuhata Brown, Koka, is out in cinemas now. And now Mana Moana, Mana Tangata. So it feels really good to have, 3 bodies of work out in circulation or in the feature space. And like I said, we've got, comedies and other kind of lifestyle shows like Life in the FFN, which is a show that I really love because I love the far, far north and the people up there. So, it's easy to get up each day and skip to work and see what the challenges are. What are the 3 main things I need to achieve for the day. Things seem to be working.
Do you think the focus on what are essentially people's stories, but also community stories like Life in the FFN? Great show, by the way. Well done.
Thank
you. Do you think that I'm showing my bias? Obviously, there, aren't I? I should try and rein that in. Do you think a lot of that has to do with upbringing, Tammy? I mean, Raitahi's an interesting place, eh?
Yeah, Raitahi was a great place to grow up. And I still treasure the place. I'm back there, once a month or every second month and trying to keep in contact. I've got lots of aunties and uncles still living, in their 70s and 80s. And so it's important that we keep those connections with them and get back. It is a shadow of its former self, but that's, part of how the country has evolved economically and how the world is globalized. So, do you try and, recapture something of the past, or is there another way for, places to be?
Do you think we might see a pivot back into story making? Well, so if you take, for example, Life in the FFN, a place which has some similar kind of economic characteristics about it to Raitahi, the likes of which you're talking about now. Do you think we might see a pivot back into those communities where, say, for example, I mentioned Raitahi because, way back when, Smash Palace and Skin Deep and films like that being filmed in places like Raitahi, do you think we might get back to that kind of approach. It feels like communities are crying out for a lot more stories to be made and developed and produced and curated back at, quote unquote, for want of a better way of putting it, grassroots, flex roots. Do you think we might see that, Sonny? Is that where the industry's going or not?
I don't know if you could say that, in a blanket sense, but my wife has just written a show, and it's a comedy drama, and it's about a woman who is returning from Australia, and she goes back to her flax roots, and we've chosen Raitahi as that place. Um, that project's not fully greenlit yet, but we're pretty confident that we're going to get there by the end of this year.
Awesome.
And so the fact that we will be able to take a story back there, and to be able to work in that town and continue that rich history of filmmaking, storytelling in that town.
Yeah.
And, I mean, quite a few empty shops, so that'll make easy for setting sets up and stuff. And I'm hoping it's going to be a good economic boost for the area as well as creativity. We look at those sorts of towns and stuff, and it's been the tried and true farming and forestry and those types of industries and stuff. But I think that we can lean into creativity and draw out people's creativity, and that can be something that's worth following as well.
I hope you don't mind me. I'm going to indulge myself.
Go.
When I was a kid, I went and watched the Foot Rock Flats movie at the embassy, actually, in Wellington. And there was a short film on before it. And the short film was called The Makutua Mrs. Jones.
Yeah.
Are you the kid on The Makutua Mrs. Jones?
Tawhai Bennett. I played Tawhai Bennett in The Makutua Mrs. Jones. And I had that... I knew of that story in Whitty's Pounamu short story series. And we went to Whangamomana, and my father, Larry Parr, directed and produced that film. And it was a really wonderful experience. It was the first time I had been in a film, and I got to work with the wonderful Annie Whittle, who was a seasoned actor at that time, and just watching her and others on the set. The Taranaki Tohunga Sunny Waru. He was such an interesting and generous man, and we had some nice conversations. And I actually was thinking about him the other day when I seen the Ropu from Aotearoa over in New York, alongside our other cousins from around Wananuia Kiwa. And it just made me reflect of the Te Māori exhibition and all of those great leaders who enabled that to happen. And Sonny was one of them, and I cherished the time that I got to spend with him.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, the opening of that exhibition, the Pacific exhibition at the Met, I think, the Met Museum in New York. You're right. He died on the way. He died coming back from that, didn't he? From Te Māori in 1984, I think it was. I think
I can't remember how he died.
I think he died on the way back. But as you say, a tohunga, and and I remember that white hair. Oh, anyway.
Yeah.
And I just clicked about that because I do remember someone mentioned it to me, and I said, I must ask Sonny, even though I never do, because whenever we catch up, we're always talking about the hurricanes. But anyway, here we are now. And I know I talked about Nig in the introduction. Has the acting bug completely gone now, Sonny? It's just not what you want to do anymore?
I think I'd like to act in something again. I really do, and I really, I
I don't know if you realise you're a film producer. You could give yourself a gig, you know that,
right? Yeah, in making this latest project, we were burning the midnight oil.
Yeah.
It's so engrossing. And, I think when I was acting, I was just about mainly unemployed. So you have lots of time to yourself, in your own mind, to think through things. And at the moment, I'm a bit too consumed with all the types of things that I'm doing. But you know, I think that if I had a period of time off and started to freshen up, I'd love the opportunity to act, and that's why I say that is, I think it's something that you really need to dedicate and work hard at if you're gonna go down that track. I think, what did I read? Something the other day about one of these actors. They were talking about, oh yeah, no, I read the script 100 times,
Wow.
and then it's everything about it's embedded in your mind after that, and that means you can let go. You're not trying to kind of figure out where you need to be, what you need to be saying, because you've imbued it in that way. So, if the opportunity comes, and I have the space and time, I'd love to do some more acting.
The actor you mentioned there, who reads the script 100 times, that actor's name wouldn't happen to be a Mr. Tammy Davis, would it?
No, I think he reads it in the car on the way.
on the way to filming that day, you reckon? And you see what I did there? I did a little bit of a segue using your half brother's name to get me to this work that I mentioned earlier, Tūranga Arere. And for those who haven't seen it, I recommend you try and find a way to have a look for this film called Tūranga Arere, the John Pohe story. I watched that, Sonny, and I thought it was superlative. And again, it's an amazing story about an amazing man. And again, I don't want to bury the lead, so I'm not going to give it all away. Porokuru Patapu, John Pohe,
Yeah, Porokuru Patapu.
and all that he was involved in. I know it's a long time ago since you made it, but there was something about that story that just resonated with me. It wasn't just because of the Te Aute connection. But it talked a lot. It reminded me of the ingenuity, of the adventure, of the brave young men of that time, and hopefully that still exists now. They went to war, did so many things, and the sad ending, of course. And again, I don't want to bury the lead, but that story had a tremendous impact on me for a lot of reasons. And I just wanted to ask you about the power and the privilege of being able to tell stories like that when it comes to people and their whānau and their descendants and relations. What is that like, Sonny, being given the opportunity to tell a story like that?
Well, that was my first real documentary that I'd made. I'd made some other smaller things, but that was my first documentary that I'd made for television broadcast, and it was a huge honour. And at that particular time, as you know, Whakaata Māori, or Māori television, as it was at that particular time, had seized a good advantage by starting to highlight Anzac Day, which, a lot of people had kind of drifted off. And through the direction that Māori television was taking, opportunities for those types of stories came up. And we were, I'll tell you a funny story. The guy, one of his nephews, Whatarangi, showed me some stuff on paper, and I read some of these papers. I couldn't believe what I was reading about this guy. Māori pilots. I heard about the battalion or the guys on the ground. I didn't know there was Māoris flying around in the skies.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started to read more, and it seemed like it was true. And he was just from down the road where I grew up, just down there at Tūranga Arere, which is between Waiōuru and Taihape. And So I was super confident. But then the family called a meeting, and I had to go present to them, and went and I presented and I did some waka papa connections and different things, and everyone was like smiling at me. And there was one of the relatives, Hari Benavidi, she was the whole meeting. She didn't even look. She just was on her laptop the whole time. And everyone's going, "This is great. This is marvelous." She shuts her laptop. I think she was on Trade Me or something like that. She goes, "Well, I disagree with it all." And just the whole vibe in the room changed. I was like, "Oh," and I was backpedaling. And so it got stalled there.
Right.
But as sort of came to know Hari better, then actually she became my best ally and made everything happen on that wano side. Um, but certainly in telling those types of stories again, massive responsibility. But in the end, to be able to hand back the story to the whānau, to the family, to the friends. It's just a magnificent honor
Ah,
to be able to do that. And I remember the town of Taihape putting on the premiere for that, and they shut streets and massive tents and stuff put up everywhere, and it was a real event, and they got to celebrate one of their own that had been forgotten, and the joy and the tears flowing, when you get 70 and 80-year-old karawas kind of crying on your shoulder. It makes it all worth it.
how much space do you allow? By the way, we're talking to Julian Arahanga, Sonny. You listen to Māpuna and RNZ National. How much space do you give to whānau? For example, I always thought Francis Cora was an interesting choice as the quote-unquote actor, although it felt to me a little bit like he became John Pohe. There's just certain shots in that I look at it and go, wow. It's just, wow. I mean, how much space do you give to whānau to give input to the story, even at that level, even as something as thing as who's going to play our whanaunga? Who do you have in mind? Oh, it doesn't look like him. All that kind of stuff. How much space do you
Yeah.
give to that?
Well, I think these days more. I think the world has changed quite a bit from the early 2000s to now.
Yeah.
Iwi Māori, wānau, hapu and stuff have all become a lot more protective of their IP, of their stories, because they weren't so there wasn't so much demand and the prevalence wasn't out there. I think the reason, I mean, to cut it quite short, the reason that Francis was there, he had just finished at Toi Whakaari Drama School. He was living in Wellington at the time. He was my bro. I was like, chuck this uniform on, because he got to read the materials and the pitch deck and understand who Johnny Pohi was. But those are the reasons why, just straight practical reasons. We don't have great budgets, and
Yeah.
we're making tunnels out of wooden tunnels out of recycled pallets, and we're making got the steering wheel for an aeroplane, which we cut up from a Morris Minor wreck and glued some things and stuff onto it. So a lot of the decisions are just kind of made out of, sheer budgetary restrictions. But now these days, I think we do a lot more. We go into a rohe, for example, we let people know that we're there. These are the reasons. We make sure we're, trying to talk to the right people. And yeah, when we are working with people, there is a lot more consideration. I mean, even with this Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, we knew it was a big story, but we needed to tell the story without the stakeholders sort of riding over the top of our decisions, because that's our space as filmmakers, as storytellers. And that was a tricky place to get to, because some people could see where we were coming from, and some people couldn't. And in the corporate space, people are risk averse, and but we, yeah, we've told the story in Mana Moana, Mana Tangata. We've held their story in the middle of it all, and their story is the bones and holding it all together. But we've needed to find ways to illustrate to the audience, what does a contemporary Māori fisher look like today? What does tikanga Māori and mātauranga Māori around the Moana look like today? These were all the things that those people were fighting for back in the 80s and the 90s. And if we didn't have those elements that are the filmmakers' choices to help tell a more rounded story, then we would have only ended up with a glorified corporate video. So, yeah, lots of consideration is taken these days, but we firmly believe that filmmakers need to be given the space to tell the story in the way they want to tell it once they understand the elements involved.
I had so much more to ask you, and I think we need to do a part 2 with you. Because, as I said, the catalogue of work is impressive, and it requires, I think, a lot more time to allow you to talk through actually how you do this and how you do it so well. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk about Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, but also a glimpse into other work that you've done, because it is, as I said, impressive. And people can go and see Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, the premiere for Mana Moana, Mana Tangata in Tamaki Makaurau. Happens tomorrow at the Dock Edge Festival. Sani tēnā koe hoa. Kia kahaira toi ngā mahi. I wish you all the best with Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, and with all the other work, and with the comedy, and the other work on Raitihi. I really hope that happens, because there's a circular piece there, for you in particular, and for your papa, and for whānau. So I wish you all the best with the mahi o hoa. Ka nui te mihi kia koe.
Hey, Jules.
Aye.
Jules.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got so much in our catalogue that we've just started putting stuff up on a YouTube channel.
Oh, ka pai.
So Tūranga Rere, Dancing in the Sky, Pixie, the story of Pixie Williams, Blue Smoke. But we've put all that stuff up on our Films YouTube channel, so people can just go there and watch
subscribe
it
and subscribe. Sonny, and subscribe.
Sorry, I'm not good on the sound. Subscribe. Hit the button.
Kia ora hoa. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Jules.
Kia ora
maita.
Kia ora maita. That was Sonny Arahanga, Julian Arahanga. Beautiful name, Julian. Julian Arahanga there from Our Films, producer for Mana Moana, Mana Tangata, directed by Toby Mills. That is us for this week. Thank you for joining us. Gee, it's cool just being able to talk to cool people, but the significance of their story is important. We'll join you next week for more from Māpuna. Until then, e ngai iwi. E ki ana te kōrero ko te toka i ākiha, he toka whitianga rā. Ko te toka i Māpuna ko tāua ki te ai ko te ripokau. Te hewa Māori ora. Kia tātou katoa.